clock turned up. Game clock at 8. He's gonna do it himself. Thomas, shake, crossover, step back.
In this very moment, a man named Isaiah Jamar Thomas was about to write himself into NCAA basketball history and begin his journey to stardom. But his story begins far before this moment, so let's go back to the very beginning. The year is 1989. Rain Man won Best Picture at the Oscars, the 49ers beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, and the Los Angeles Lakers were facing off against the bad boy Pistons in the NBA Finals. At the same time, a Lakers fan living in Inglewood, California, named James Thomas, had made a bet with a friend of his that the Lakers would beat the Pistons in the '89 Finals. In fact, he was so sure of his bet, he put his future son's name on the line, betting that if the Pistons won, he would name his son after legendary Pistons point guard Isaiah Thomas. So when the Pistons proceeded to sweep the Lakers in 4 games, led by point guard and Finals MVP Isaiah Thomas, James kept his word. His son was born Isaiah Thomas on February 9th, 1989, with an added A by his mother Tina to match the biblical spelling. Isaiah was brought up in Tacoma, Washington with his siblings. Isaiah was a basketball fanatic. He used to rush home from church and school and sneak into his grandfather's house just to watch NBA games on CBS. Thomas was obsessed with being the best at basketball as possible and played organized basketball in Tacoma for his first team at just 8 years old. He played basketball all through middle school before playing his freshman and sophomore year at Curtis High School. IT took the state of Washington by storm, even getting praise and respect from Curtis alumni and NBA legend Jamal Crawford. IT averaged 32 points per game in his 2 years at Curtis, and his most defining game of his high school career being when he went for an absurd 51 points in the state semi-finals, hitting 8 threes in the process, doing this at just 15 years of age. When Thomas was a junior in high school, in order to step up his game, he made the very difficult decision to move cross-country 3,000 miles away to a bigger basketball school in Connecticut. This would mean he would be without his parents and family for the first time and for the end of his high school career. However, Isaiah would thrive. He averaged 33 points a game at South Kent. Unfortunately, his height would impede him. Standing at only 5'9", he did not receive many D1 offers. But when his home state's college of the Washington Huskies sent him an offer, he accepted, and in 2008, Thomas became a Husky. Thomas had a decent first year in college, winning the Pac-10 Freshman of the Year and leading his team in scoring, averaging 15.5 points a game. He even led them to the NCAA tournament, where they lost in the second round. However, for a team like the Huskies, this was impressive, as before this they had only been past the first round 8 times in their 100-year history. Thomas would improve his averages going into his sophomore year, as he averaged 17 points per game and was selected to first team All-Pac-10. Despite this, he had to take a backseat to senior Quincy Pondexter, who averaged 20 points per game. The duo managed to take the Huskies all the way to the third round, where they would lose to eventual semi-finalist West Virginia. Although Isaiah's first 2 years in college were very impressive, it was his junior year that cemented himself into Washington basketball history. Coming into Thomas's junior year, there were questions on what IT could really achieve. IT continued to average 17 points a game, but on far improved efficiency, as well as doubling his assists per game from 3 to 6. However, the roster was significantly worse this year, so there were little expectations of what Isaiah and the team could do. But Isaiah would lead them to a 24-11 record and took them to the Pac-10 championship game. The date is March 12, 2011. Thomas has led his Washington team to the championship game against a 27-7 much better Arizona team. IT showed from the jump the type of game he was about to have. hitting a step back three to start everything off. It was a back and forth game all through the first half, with the biggest lead only being 7 for Arizona. IT would help the Huskies fight back, and the score was brought back to only a 3-point differential of 36-33 to Arizona going into the half. The second half was more of the same, but Washington found themselves down 4 with 50 seconds left. Thomas would hit a 3, making it a 1-point game. However, Arizona would come back and make the game 66-62 with only 25 seconds remaining. In normal basketball circumstances, this would mean the game is likely over, but Thomas had different ideas. He then proceeded to find his teammate wide open in the corner for a 3. After Arizona hit their free throws, it was a 3-point game with 14 seconds remaining. IT once again crossed his defender, collapsed the defense, and found his same teammate for another wide open 3. 68-68. Overtime. Overtime continued to be a back and forth game, and it was tied 75-75 with 15 seconds remaining. IT called for an ISO, took the ball up, and well, the rest is history.
And we're tied 75 again. Isaiah, shot clock turned off. Game clock at 8. He's gonna do it himself. Thomas, shake, crossover, step back. At the buzzer, Young, safe, and Washington wins it on a last-second J. Cold-blooded.
Gus, what has to happen in this situation is the officials must go to the monitor. Clearly, it was well before the buzzer. Watch the backboard, see it light up. Not until the ball was in the net. But by rule, the officials go. This is unbelievable. Out of his hand with 1 point something to go. No problem. 28 points for Isaiah Thomas. Fitting that he should be the one to make the basket at the end.
Thomas would decide to skip his senior year and declare for the 2011 NBA Draft. June 23rd to 2011, the NBA Draft, the moment all young basketballers dream of, their name being called out, knowing all their hard work paid off and their dream is accomplished. Well, it wasn't so straightforward for Isaiah. For those who don't know, there are 60 picks split into 2 rounds in the NBA Draft. Most players who go on to have great careers are usually selected in the top 14, known as the lottery picks. Players such as Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson and Kemba Walker were among those picks in this draft. This draft even had some notable names outside of the lottery, such as Kawhi Leonard at pick 15 and Jimmy Butler at pick 30. However, Isaiah would have to wait a while to hear his name called.
With the 60th pick in the 2011 NBA Draft, the Sacramento Kings select Isaiah Thomas from the University of Washington.
Isaiah would be drafted 60th overall by the Sacramento Kings, the last pick of the last round of the draft. Majority of second round picks don't even get offered their rookie contracts, considering that what Isaiah would go on to do was never done before him and I doubt will ever be done again. Isaiah actually surprised a lot of people in his rookie year. Being a 60th pick and a 5'9", 22-year-old point guard, not many people expected him to even get game time, but Isaiah played all 66 games of a lockout season and even averaged 11 points per game on 44% shooting, making the all-rookie second team in the process, and that was incredibly impressive for the last pick of the draft. However, due to the fact he played for the Sacramento Kings, he didn't have much team success. The Kings would finish the year 22-44, missing the playoffs. Isaiah would improve in his second year, even cementing himself as a starting point guard, starting 62 games of the 79 he played that year. He averaged 13 points per game and even had 3 30-point games. This was the season the league began to realise that Isaiah had a lot of potential and was greatly overlooked in the NBA draft. However, not a surprise, the Kings were bad. Worse actually, finishing the year 28-54. However, it was IT's third year that he really showed how talented he was, averaging 20 points per game and 6 assists per game, even shooting his most efficient 45% from the field. Despite this, the Kings didn't improve at all, and they finished 28-54, once again missing the playoffs. This lack of team success held IT back from any All-Star shouts and any real recognition, and by the end of the 13-14 season, he was 25 years of age with 0 playoff experience. Therefore, in that offseason, IT decided to sign with the Phoenix Suns. Isaiah decided to sign for the Suns for the 2014-15 season, and would come off the bench as the Suns also had talented point guard Eric Bledsoe and All-Star Goran Dragic. Unfortunately, the 3-guard experiment failed, and Goran Dragic was shipped to the Heat at the deadline, and the Celtics traded a first-round pick for Isaiah Thomas. Danny Ainge and the Celtics had actually tried to sign Isaiah in free agency, but they would have to settle for trading for IT. And this was the beginning of Isaiah's breakout time in the league. Isaiah would finish the 14-15 season with the Celtics strong, averaging 19 points and 6 assists off the bench. The most impressive part of what IT did though was how he transformed the team completely. The Celtics were 20-31, way out of the playoff picture before IT was traded there, and they ended up finishing in the playoffs as an almost 500 team. That is insane. IT showed he was a leader as he dragged this below average team all the way to the playoffs. Boston was looked at as a team that was going to be stuck in limbo, constantly trying to rebuild, but one man changed all of that, taking a team from a 20-31 record to a 40-42 record. IT showed Danny Ainge exactly what he wanted to see, and despite the Celtics being swept in the first round of the playoffs by LeBron James, the starting point guard at the time, Rajon Rondo, would leave that offseason to join the Bulls, and Isaiah Thomas finally was given the keys to an NBA franchise. He was finally getting some of the respect he deserved. Now, fans and Danny Ainge with the Celtics expected Isaiah to be good and for Boston to be a fringe playoff team. What would end up happening wasn't expected at all. Once again, IT would defy the odds and expectations for himself. IT from day one showed the type of season he was going to have, dropping 27-7 in a win while shooting 52% from the field. Isaiah was now officially the king of the fourth. He would become the best in the league in clutch time this year. The best part of the season would have to be when he led the Celtics to beat the 73-win Warriors team, giving them one of their 9 losses that year. To think the Celtics only a year before this were dead in the water and had no hope of the playoffs before Isaiah transformed them into an exciting playoff team. It's insane. Thomas would go on to lead the Celtics to the 5th seed and a great record of 48-34, while averaging 22 points per game and 6 assists per game, as well as career highs across the boards. Isaiah would also finally get the recognition he never got throughout his life. He would make the All-Star game, making him the only player ever to be the last pick of a draft as well as being an All-Star. He would also be the shortest ever All-Star. The Celtics would go on to face the Hawks in the playoffs, and despite it being a fairly close series, the Celtics as a team just didn't play very well and they weren't good enough, and once again they lost in the first round, in 6 games this time. In the offseason, Danny Ainge knew he had to improve the team in order to compete at a higher level in the playoffs. The Celtics would decide to acquire All-Star free agent Al Horford, improving their overall defense and their team in general. Now, coming into the 2016-17 season, there were high expectations of Isaiah and the Celtics, but no one quite expected the insanity Isaiah was about to do. If you thought his jump to an all-star caliber player was remarkable, his jump the next season was even greater. Isaiah would average 29 points a game and be a legitimate MVP candidate throughout the season. The new and improved Celtics would end up being the 1 seed in the East with a record of 53 wins and 29 losses, led by Isaiah averaging 29 points a game, 6 assists, a steal, while shooting 46% from the field and 38% from 3. Moreover, Isaiah really was the king of the fourth this year as well, averaging 10 points per game in the fourth quarter, the highest in NBA history still to this date. To put in perspective how insane this really is, only 4 other players have ever averaged more than 8.5 points per game in the fourth quarter. Tracy McGrady with 8.6 points in 2003, Kobe Bryant with 9.5 points in 2006, LeBron James with 9.1 points in 2008, and Russell Westbrook the same year as Isaiah. The game that really solidified him as the king of the fourth though was during his historical night against the Heat when he scored 53 points, 29 of which were in the fourth quarter, another NBA record. Isaiah also had an insane scoring streak during the year, scoring above 20 in 43 games in a row. During the streak, Isaiah also scored 40 on 4 separate occasions, a Boston Celtics record and the 7th highest streak in modern NBA history. Of course, Isaiah would make the All-Star game again and even made the All-NBA second team this season. This is personally my favourite individual season for a player ever, and a common misconception I find of this season is that people think it was a one-off. It wasn't. This was a man who had been waiting his entire life to show how good of a basketballer he really was, and he was finally given the tools and opportunity to dominate, and he did. He was a consistent 17 to 20 point per game scorer up until this point. He always had this in his locker. The Celtics sat at the top of the Eastern Conference as the playoffs neared. The Celtics were getting ready to face the Bulls in the first round of the playoffs, and the fans were excited for what would be the deepest playoff run in years. But it all came to a screeching halt when heartbreaking news broke.
A poignant moment from earlier today on the floor at the Garden in Boston. Isaiah Thomas consoled by his close friend Avery Bradley, still trying to cope with the tragic loss of his 22-year-old sister China just yesterday. And a moment of silence here at the Garden, and tears streaming down the face of Isaiah Thomas. He will play, and moments ago he was introduced to the home crowd.
Despite having to go through one of the worst things a human can endure, Isaiah still decided to play, a showing of how much he cared about the city of Boston and his teammates. The Celtics would actually lose the first 2 games at home to the Bulls. This raised a huge amount of questions about the Celtics and their legitimacy as a first seed, with some people even calling them the worst first seed ever. But IT would answer back in a big way, dropping 33 in Game 4, tying up the series 2-2. The Celtics, led by Thomas, would then go on to win the series in 6 games, comfortably advancing to the next round. This next series is one of my favourite playoff series ever. These teams absolutely hated each other. There was fighting, pushing, trash talk, and even better, elite basketball from both Boston and Washington. Game 1 was a win for the Celtics. Thomas put Boston on his back and dropped 33 points, even losing his tooth in the process. This set the tone of the series. If that wasn't impressive enough, Game 2, IT sent an absolute message to the NBA and played a game that will never ever be forgotten. This would also be the highest heights IT would ever reach. May 2nd, 2017 was Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Semifinals, but to IT, it would have been his sister China's 23rd birthday. IT still decided to play and would go on to score 53 points and even brought the Celtics back from being down by 14. The Celtics would go on to win this game in OT, led by Thomas, and Thomas would go on to dedicate his performance to his late sister.
It's my sister.
It's her birthday today. Happy birthday. She would have been 23 today, so everything I do is for her, and she's watching over me, so that's all her.
The rest of the series was amazing. The Celtics would end up winning the series in Game 7 after the Wizards took them to the absolute breaking point. IT had very good Game 6 and Game 7 performances that definitely contributed to this. Unfortunately, in the background of all of this happening, IT had actually been dealing with hip pain. Although mild throughout the season, he got multiple tests done and the Celtics said he was okay to play. So as a man who loved Boston and his team, he played his ass off in the playoffs. But the 7-game series had taken everything out of him, and by the time it was the Eastern Conference Finals, the Celtics got obliterated by eventual finalists LeBron and the Cavs, and after Game 2, Thomas could barely walk and had to sit out the rest of the series. What we would find out later is that the Celtics had actually lied to IT and caused the end of his career. In an interview IT did with All of the Smoke podcast, he revealed more information about the situation.
So I hurt myself back in March. Karl Anthony Towns had fell on me, tweaked my hip a little bit, but at that point in time, I only messed my knee up, like I sprained my knee. My hip was like, I didn't feel nothing. Till a couple weeks later where I felt some discomfort in my hip. It wasn't nothing crazy. We took MRIs, everything was solid, boom. Once we hit the playoffs, the tragic news happened. My hip was slowly getting a little worse. The only thing that I think they handled wrong was not explaining to me what the extent of my injury could be if I do play.
Isaiah believed that Boston didn't tell him enough. Isaiah thought it was just a minor injury, and if he kept going, it wouldn't be a big deal. The Celtics failed to tell him how severe his injury really was. Isaiah effectively put his career on the line for a gentleman sweep against LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Celtics didn't tell him the severity of the injury, as they wanted to use him for every single thing they had. Isaiah was also setting up to be given a max contract that season. However, the Celtics knew how bad his injury really was, and after making him play through it, they would trade him to the Cavs for Kyrie Irving. And even after everything Isaiah did for the city of Boston, the front office didn't even have the decency to invite him in to sit down and explain the situation. He found out he was traded over the phone at home. There's even clips of this, and it's heartbreaking.
When Danny called me, I missed his call. When I got back to Seattle, I missed his call. He texted me, IT, give me a call back. Called him back, then he asked me how I was doing. I was like, I just got back to Seattle. He knew I was on my anniversary. He knew I was in Miami, so I said, I just got back to Seattle. I'm chilling, headed home. And then it got a little quiet. And then that's when he broke it to me. He's like, well, IT, I just traded you. That's crazy. And saying what I've done for the city and what I meant to him and all that bullshit.
And although I don't blame the Celtics for trading for Kyrie Irving, as the NBA is a business, the trade ended up doing nothing. Kyrie had very limited success in Boston and never even got to the finals, basically never taking the Celtics further than Isaiah did. The thing I blame Boston for is not being honest with a man who gave absolutely everything to the city while he could. Isaiah clearly loved the Boston Celtics and the city of Boston, yet the team didn't hesitate to screw him over while they could and used him to try and improve. Yet it didn't work, and Isaiah was shifted to Cleveland and he was never the same again. The injury absolutely weighed down and destroyed his career. After the spell in Cleveland, he would end up being traded at the deadline to the Lakers, and since then he had never been able to get back to his MVP form. He looked slower with less dexterity. The hip issue really destroyed his career. He ended up going from almost getting a max contract to getting a minimum contract in just a year. And since then, he has been bouncing around the league from different teams, and currently he is not even on an NBA team. The story of Isaiah Thomas is equally inspiring as it is sad. It shows that if you work hard and try at something you're passionate about, you can make it to the highest level. but at the same time, it shows why the NBA is truly a business and why the athletes should always put themselves first, as these franchises, even if you think they love you, will trade you without even a second thought. Despite this, Isaiah Thomas will be remembered in NBA history. He will be remembered as the shortest guy on the court at all times, the shortest All-Star ever, the shortest All-NBA player ever, and for blowing expectations of him out of the water, not only in the NBA, but throughout his entire life. But more importantly, Isaiah Thomas will be remembered as the 5'9" man who stood amongst giants and stole the nation's heart. Thank you so much for watching. This video took me a lot of effort, so make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know if you would like these type of videos to continue, as I might make it a series in the future. Thank you so much, and until next time, see ya.